Pain has a way of lying to you. It whispers that you are small, broken, and powerless. But pain does not define you. What defines you is the divine self within, the part of you that cannot be destroyed. When you believe the lie of pain, you shrink. When you believe the truth of your divine nature, you rise. Even in depression, even in struggle, you carry a strength that no setback can erase. So the next time pain tries to convince you that you are less, stop and remind yourself, I am unbreakable. I am more than this moment. Because you are a divine self from the one true God, and you cannot be broken. Depression tells you that you are done, that your best days are behind you. It makes you feel heavy, slow, and unworthy of trying again. But depression cannot touch what God placed inside you. Your divine self is unbreakable. It cannot be erased by darkness, by failure, or by doubt. You may bend under the weight, but you will never break. Every time you choose to take one step forward, even the smallest action, you prove that depression has no final say. Do not wait for perfect feelings. Act now, in faith, and let your belief guide your next move. Remember this, you are a divine self from the one true God, and you cannot be broken. You have been taught to respect pain as a warning, to treat struggle like a roadblock, and to let fear speak loudest when decisions are required. And in that very habit, the enemy wins. Pain becomes a reason to stop, struggle becomes a reason to delay, and fear becomes a reason to shrink. And before you know it, your life is arranged around avoiding discomfort rather than pursuing truth. There is a simpler, coarser truth beneath the surface. Pain, struggle, and fear are not destiny, they are signals, and if you choose, you can turn every signal into strength, every setback into the furnace that forges persistence, and every trembling step into the steady march of a divine life. The choice you face is not whether you will have pain, for pain is universal. It is not whether you will meet struggle, for struggle is the human condition, and it is not whether you will feel fear, for fear is the mind's alarm. The choice is whether you will allow those things to become your excuses or your teachers. When pain comes, notice it without making it your identity. Because pain is an experience that passes through you and does not define the core that first saw the pain. When struggle rises, do not treat it as proof that you were meant to stop, because struggle refines the will like heat refines metal. And when fear reaches for your throat, do not hand it the steering wheel, because fear is a reaction, not a verdict. This is not sugarcoating or false optimism. This is a sober recalibration of how you use reality. You will not be spared the hard things, you will not be insulated from loss, and you will not be exempt from disappointment. But you can stop letting those facts map the boundaries of what you attempt. Instead of asking, why me, ask, what will I do with this? And in that question you reclaim agency. There is a voice that will try to convince you that if you have not yet succeeded, it is because you are missing a gift, a talent, or the right moment. That voice will wrap pain in a story about fate and disguise inertia as wisdom. That voice is not your director. It is the byproduct of survival instincts trying to keep you in the cave. The true director of your life is deeper than that voice, a presence within that is steady and luminous, the part of you that remembers purpose even when memory is clouded. Call that presence the divine self. Call it the inner witness. Call it whatever name rings true. But do not mistake the noisy, frightened part of you for that core. The divine within does not avoid difficulty. It endures and acts. When you anchor on that sacred center, you stop arguing with the seasons and begin to use them. But here is the truth most people overlook. Excuses and experiences have names, and once you name them, you lessen their power. You will find it useful to say plainly, this is pain, this is fear, this is struggle. The clarity of naming removes the fog that excuses thrive in. When you say it out loud, you separate the fact from the fiction. The fact is the sensation. The fiction is the story you tell about it. There will always be a tempting story that says the world is punishing you, that the timing is wrong, that people are against you, that the system is rigged. And while it may be partly true in certain details, belief in those stories should not stop your work. The work belongs to you, not to the story. You must learn to convert the energy of pain into the fuel of persistence. Pain is sometimes a teacher, sometimes a signal, sometimes an unavoidable cost. Whatever role it plays today, you get to decide whether it will be a stop sign or a roadmap. There is a practical discipline in this conversion. Feel the reality, then commit to action that is proportionate to what you can do now. Small, consistent effort beats dramatic perfection that never begins. You do not need the absence of pain to proceed. You need a decision to proceed in spite of it. The first step is always the same, an intention held steadily and acted upon. And the next step is another decision, and then another. Over time, those decisions become your habits, and habits build character, and character shapes destiny. Do not confuse suffering and martyrdom with value. There is a difference between enduring as a means of growth and suffering as an identity you wear to prove something to yourself or others. Growth asks you to engage, to learn, to adapt. Vanity sometimes asks you to display pain as currency. If your pain becomes a badge, you will miss the lesson. Use suffering as a resource, not a resume. Ask yourself what this trial is teaching you, what skill it is training, what humility or courage it is building, and then return those lessons to your practice. That is how struggle becomes meaningful rather than merely heavy. There are forces that will try to justify your avoidance. People will tell you that your limits are noble, that humility requires you to stay small, that caution is wisdom, and that safety is the highest aim. Listen politely, but remember that safety without risk is a slow death of potential. We are called to a life that contains both fear and a refusal to be governed by it. Measure caution against courage, and do not let cautiousness calcify into cowardice. Real courage is not the absence of fear. It is choosing what matters more than fear. Let your priorities outrank your alarms. You will find excuses in the language you use. I cannot becomes I will not, and then becomes habit, and habit becomes identity. The language of excuses is often soft and persuasive because it promises relief without change. It reframes responsibility as oppression and asks you to accept less. Listen for it in your speech. When you say, I am too tired, ask whether rest is required or resistance is convenient. When you say, I lack resources, ask whether resourcefulness is being ignored. When you blame the world for your inertia, ask what you are doing to move. That line of questioning will stop the flow of excuses because it forces you to act like the person you say you want to be. There are practical rhythms that protect you from collapse. Design your days around actions, not feelings. Decide the work you will do when courage is present and the work you will do when it is not, and then keep both lists. You will notice that the work you do in low momentum moments matters as much, sometimes more, than the work you do when you are inspired. This is not glamorous, but it is how lives are built. Momentum is not a gift, it is a practice. Each small, steady effort compounds into results that surprise you later. Trust the compound interest of consistent choices. Remember that fear is often a story about future loss, and loss has not yet arrived. Therefore, fear is a hypothetical enemy. You must battle fear with presence and with responsibility. Presence brings you into the moment where action is possible, and responsibility turns vague anxiety into specific tasks. If you are afraid of failure, create a failure plan that teaches you what to try again. If you fear judgment, practice doing the work privately and steadily until the judgment loses weight. Fear diminishes under the weight of action because action proves things, and evidence relieves doubt. Evidence is the antidote to fearful fiction. When the world tests you with consistent setbacks, do not interpret pattern as proof of a personal verdict. Sometimes circumstances are unfortunate, sometimes systems are unjust, but often the pattern is the testing ground for deeper commitment. The difference between those who fail and those who rise is not the fairness of the trial. It is the persistence of the response. There is no merit badge for never being tried. There is only merit in how you respond when you are tried. Face the tests with a mind that seeks lessons, and a heart committed to returning to work. You will be tempted to postpone your life until the conditions are perfect. Perfection is a mirage. It waits for nothing, and nothing ever arrives on its timeline. The wise do not wait for ideal weather to plant the seed. They plant in the imperfect soil and tend the crop. If your dream seems distant, take the clearest next step you can see and do it. Do not spend precious energy rehearsing a perfect opening. Spend it rehearsing the discipline of showing up. The discipline will deliver you to places that rehearsed hopes never reach. This is not trivial. It is the central engine of progress. There is also a spiritual economy at work when pain and struggle come. Everything you endure can be transformed into a deeper capacity to love, a broader sympathy for others, and a stronger resolve to serve. When you let hardship temper you, you gain the ability to hold both your own wound and another's hand without losing balance. That is the sacred use of pain. If your suffering only turns you inward in bitterness, you have missed the spiritual alchemy. If it turns you outward in humility and usefulness, you have passed through the trial. The divine self within is not diminished by hardship. It is given a greater range to care. Do not mistake rest for surrender. There are seasons for retreat and seasons for advance, and both can be sacred. Rest is a tool, not a tyrant, and it must be earned by work and return to work with renewed clarity. If you rest to avoid, your rest will corrode into avoidance. If you rest to recover, your rest will replenish the courage needed for the next push. Learn to distinguish recovery from avoidance by setting a return plan for every season of rest. That plan keeps the rest healthy and the project alive. You will meet skeptics who try to make your resolve into vanity and your perseverance into stubbornness. Do not confuse stubbornness with fidelity. Stubbornness stays attached to pride. Fidelity stays attached to purpose. Ask whether your persistence is hungry for ego or hungry for calling. The answer will reveal whether you are building something for the world or for your own applause. Let purpose be the architect of your endurance. There will be times when the noise of the world seems louder than your conviction, when the voices of doubt are plentiful, and when you find yourself considering easier paths. In those moments, return to the simplest discipline. Begin again. Begin small. Begin humble. Begin with a single tangible act that points toward the life you claim. Beginning is not proof of perfection. It is proof of defiance against inertia. The person who begins again many times accrues wisdom and a stubborn confidence that cannot be manufactured by comfort. Do not take others' timetable as the measure of your worth. Timetables are external clocks, not destiny. You will find that the world sometimes moves quickly for some and slowly for others. And that disparity is not always a moral barometer. Your responsibility is to your own calling, and your calling moves at its own pace. Respecting that pace does not excuse laziness. It enforces patience calibrated by effort. Keep investing where you can, and stop measuring by someone else's calendar. Here is a very practical truth that will free many of you. Action disproves excuses more effectively than argument. You can debate your limitations until your words are exhausted, or you can start the work that will show you what you are truly capable of. Action produces data. Data corrects narrative. Narrative yields to fact. If you are uncertain about what you can do, choose an experiment small enough that failure is instructive and large enough that success changes you. Run the experiment, gather the results, and let the evidence guide your next move. There will be necessary sacrifices on this path, but sacrifice without meaning is waste. Choose sacrifices that enlarge your capacity for service, that increase your skill, or that free you to do more. Sacrifice your fear of embarrassment to gain experience. Sacrifice your obsession with immediate comfort to build endurance. Sacrifice short-term applause for long-term mastery. Those are not painful losses. They are investments with returns measured in the life you become. You will also meet setbacks that are not your fault, and in those moments, do not invent guilt where none belongs. Accept the reality, grieve if required, and rebuild with clarity. Avoid the false piety of blaming yourself for everything. That is not humility. It is paralysis. Responsible people accept their share and move forward. They do not accept responsibility for what they did not cause. Learn to distinguish where your agency begins and ends, because clarity about agency frees you to exercise what you own. One of the most powerful habits you can build is the habit of daily gratitude that is not dependent on circumstances. Gratitude is not a denial of hardship. It is a refusal to let hardship erase what is true. When you recognize the small functioning parts of your life, the mind that can still decide, the breath that still arrives, the hands that can still work, you cultivate an inner reservoir of strength that excuses cannot draw from. Gratitude marshals resources for endurance. Finally, make your life an argument against excuses. Show through steady, ordinary acts that human beings can persist through pain without surrendering to it. Do not look for applause. Let the work be its own witness. Keep returning, keep showing up, keep building. There will be days when you are tired and the world seems indifferent, but those are the days that decide the arc of your life. Make your decisions in the tired season. They will have the most integrity. And when you stand at the end of a long day and wonder whether it was worth it, remember that every small act of commitment compounds into a future you cannot fully imagine now. The graduate who studied while exhausted, the parent who served despite doubt, the artist who painted through rejection, the leader who chose the right small task when glory was absent. Their steady choices set new coordinates for what is possible. Do not undervalue the quiet courage of persistence. Rise to the reality that pain, struggle, and fear are not your rulers. They are the raw materials of a life that chooses to be greater. Turn them into your reasons to refine, not your reasons to retreat. Stand with deliberate intention, act with steady courage, and measure progress by the integrity of your choices rather than the ease of your path. You are accountable to a deeper calling than comfort, and that calling requires you to show up. Close this with the simplest claim and the deepest promise. You are not the stories you tell under pressure. You are the will that chooses under pressure, and that will is connected to something greater than the small fears that speak at night. Stand in that deeper presence. Let pain be a teacher, struggle a forger, and fear a signal that you can respond to. Turn excuses into evidence of what you refuse to do, and then decide to be otherwise. You are a divine self from the one true God. You cannot be broken.